In the quiet lakeside community of Willow Ridge, where the mornings smelled of pine and the evenings shimmered with golden reflections on the water, people believed they already knew everyone who mattered. It was a place of gossip, pride, and long-standing. Families who believed their opinions were the only ones that counted. Among these familiar faces was a woman named Margaret Collins, a middle-aged resident who had slowly turned into the stereotype everyone whispered about. A controlling, entitled, rule-obsessed Karen. She had an opinion about every lawn, every mailbox, every parked car, and every stranger who dared to step out of place. And she especially believed she ran the lake, despite the fact that she owned nothing more than her house on the shoreline. Every summer morning, she marched up and down the private dock area enforcing the HOA rules that she didn't even fully understand, but she acted like the lake belonged to her, scolding kids for splashing too loudly, lecturing teens for sitting on the dock, and complaining to neighbors about anything and everything. It gave her a sense of power she never had growing up. Then, one peaceful Tuesday morning, something happened that would shake the entire community and expose the truth they had ignored for decades. At 6:30 a.m., just as the mist was lifting from the surface of the water, a small white fishing boat appeared near the private dock. The man steering it was older, late 70s perhaps, with a strong but quiet presence. He wore a faded Navy veteran hat, a weathered plaid shirt, and held a stainless steel mug of coffee as if it were a morning ritual he had followed his whole life. His skin was dark, his hair graying beneath his hat, and his expression calm as the water he moved across. His name was Henry Walker, though most people in the community had never met him. To them, he looked like someone who didn't belong, someone trespassing on their beloved lake. And unfortunately for him, Margaret saw him before anyone else. She stormed out of her house in her bright pink jogging suit, her arms swinging in irritation. "Excuse me," she shouted across the dock, startling a few birds perched nearby. Henry looked up slowly but didn't say a word. He continued tying his boat to a post, moving with the patience of someone who had lived enough years not to be affected by unnecessary noise. "Sir!" Margaret barked louder, marching down the dock. "You cannot park your boat here. This is a private dock! Private property! You need to leave immediately." Henry took a sip of his coffee, then calmly replied, "Good morning, ma'am. Good morning? That's all you have to say?" She snapped. "This area isn't for outsiders. These docks are for HOA-approved residents only. You can't just roam around here like you own the place." Henry paused, studying her with a confused but gentle expression. "I'm not bothering anybody. Just tying up for a moment." "Not bothering anybody?" "You're trespassing! This area isn't for outsiders. These docks are for HOA-approved residents only. You can't just roam around here like you own the place." Henry paused, studying her with a confused but gentle expression. "I'm not bothering anybody. Just tying up for a moment." "Not bothering anybody?" "You're trespassing!" Margaret pointed at the boat. "Move it, now!" Some neighbors began peeking out their windows, curious about the commotion. A few even stepped outside, whispering, watching, waiting for the confrontation to escalate. They knew Margaret's temper, but none of them expected what she would say next. "People like you are always causing problems," she muttered under her breath. Henry stiffened slightly. "People like me?" he repeated quietly. Margaret folded her arms. "Yes, people who don't follow rules, don't respect neighborhoods, and just assume they can go wherever they want. Well, not here. Not on my lake?" Henry raised an eyebrow. "Your lake?" he asked, amused. "Yes, my lake," Margaret snapped, unaware of how ridiculous she sounded. "Now move your boat or I'll call the HOA president." Henry didn't react. Instead, he finished tying the rope neatly, then set his mug down on the dock railing. "You go right ahead," he said calmly. "Call anyone you like." Margaret whipped out her phone and started dialing, pacing wildly. "Yes, hello. There's an unauthorized boat on the dock. Some man who clearly doesn't live here. I want him removed immediately." Henry continued to stand there quietly, watching the lake instead of engaging with her anger. A few minutes later, the HOA president, a nervous middle-aged man named Todd, arrived, jogging down the dock while adjusting his glasses. Todd already looked stressed. Dealing with Margaret was a daily burden he never got used to. "Margaret," he began carefully. "What seems to be the problem?" "The problem is this," she said, pointing dramatically at Henry. "This man is trespassing and refuses to move his boat. I demand you remove him. Right now." Todd swallowed hard, suddenly looking very uncomfortable. He glanced at Henry, then back at Margaret. "Margaret, this isn't what you think." "I know exactly what I think," she snapped. "He does not belong here. He is breaking HOA regulations. Actually, he's breaking the law." Todd rubbed the back of his neck. "Margaret, please, calm down. You're making a mistake." "A mistake? The only mistake is letting random people use this dock." Todd looked helplessly at Henry. Henry nodded politely at him. "Morning, son." Todd nodded back. "Mr. Walker." Margaret froze. "Mr. what?" Todd took a deep breath. "Margaret, this is Henry Walker." "And?" she demanded. "Whoever he is, he can't park here." Todd shut his eyes briefly. "Margaret, he's not trespassing." "What do you mean he's not trespassing?" she screeched. Todd hesitated. "Because he owns the lake." Silence. Pure, heavy silence spread across the dock as the words sank in. Margaret blinked rapidly. What did you just say?" Todd swallowed. "Mr. Henry Walker is the legal owner of Willow Ridge Lake, the entire lake, all 89 acres of it." Gasps echoed from the neighbors who had come outside. Margaret's face turned pale. "That's impossible," she whispered. "No one owns the lake. It's the HOA's property." "No," Todd corrected gently. "The HOA only manages the shoreline and the surrounding community. But the lake itself? It was bought 52 years ago by Mr. Walker's family. He inherited it when his father passed away." Margaret stared at Henry in disbelief. "You own the lake?" Henry nodded slowly. "Since 1973. But how? You never come around here." Henry looked toward the water, the sunlight reflecting in his calm eyes. "Because I don't like being treated differently everywhere." "I go," he said quietly. "I served this country for more than 20 years. After I retired, I mostly stayed on the far side of the lake where my cabin is. I only come here every few months." Margaret's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. Henry continued, "But today I decided to come here. Thought I'd enjoy the sunrise from this side of the lake. Didn't expect such a warm welcome." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Todd cleared his throat. "Mr. Walker, on behalf of the HOA?" Henry raised a hand kindly. "No need to apologize. I've dealt with worse, but—" He stepped closer, his expression firm now. "I've also been watching this community for years, listening, hearing complaints, seeing folks get harassed for no reason." Margaret slowly stepped back. I wasn't harassing anyone. I was just enforcing rules." Henry tilted his head. "Rules you created for yourself." Some neighbors nodded. Others looked embarrassed. Henry continued, "You yell at kids for fishing. You scold families for using the dock. You even threatened to fine a man for hosting a barbecue on his own property." Margaret's face burned with shame. Henry sighed. "This lake was meant to bring people peace, not fear." He turned to Todd. "I'm making some changes." Todd straightened. "Changes, sir?" "Yes." Henry looked around at the watching crowd. "Starting today, I'm dissolving the HOA's control of the dock area." Gasps broke out. "From now on, any respectful resident may use the docks, freely, without harassment." People cheered quietly, relieved. Henry looked at her gently. "Ma'am, I own the lake. I absolutely can." Todd nodded in agreement. "He can, Margaret," Henry continued. "And one more thing." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper, an official notice. He handed it to Margaret. "This is an order removing you from the HOA board permanently." Margaret's breath caught in her throat. "What? You're kicking me out?" Henry nodded. "You've caused enough harm. You have every right to live here. But you will no longer dictate how others enjoy their homes." Margaret's hands shook as she read the notice. But I was only trying to keep the neighborhood perfect." Henry smiled sadly. "Perfection isn't control. It's kindness." Margaret didn't respond. Tears filled her eyes, not just from embarrassment, but from realizing how terribly she had behaved. Neighbors whispered. Some shook their heads. Others simply walked away. relieved that peace might finally return. Henry calmly picked up his coffee mug and stepped into his boat. As he untied the rope, he added, "Ma'am, the lake is for everyone, and it always has been." With that, he gently steered the boat away, moving across the sparkling water like a quiet guardian returning to his home. The community of Willow Ridge was never the same after that day. Kids played freely again. Families gathered by the shore for picnics without fear of being scolded. The dock became a place of laughter, not tension. And Margaret, she changed too, slowly, quietly. She began volunteering at local events, offering help instead of complaints. Every morning she walked by the lake, not to control it, but to appreciate the calm she once ruined. And every now and then, out on the far end of the lake, she would see a small white boat and an old veteran raising his hand in greeting. She always waved back. Because sometimes, one moment, one mistake, can teach a person more than a lifetime of rules ever could.